Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. George Bodenheimer is an ESPN and cable industry pioneer, was the company's longest-tenured president, a position he held from 1998 to 2011, overseeing all multimedia sports assets of the Walt Disney Company from 2003 to 2011, serving as co-chairman Disney Media Networks from 2004 to 2011. He served as executive chairman of ESPN Inc. from 2012 to 2014, and he's the author of the new book, Every Town is a Sports Town, Business Leadership at ESPN, From the Mailroom to the Boardroom. With us on the program today, George Bodenheimer. Welcome to the program, sir. It's great to have you with us.
Oh, thank you, Rick. It's my pleasure.
Really enjoyed the book, and I'll mention now that proceeds from the book sales will go to the V Foundation for Cancer Research. So many great stories coming out of the book, and let's go back to your early days. You got this economics degree from Denison University, Denison College. You're looking for a job in sports. You're living with your parents. Unsuccessful at that point. In fact, the only thing you really got was a tie from the Philadelphia Phillies. And a friend of your father's says, try out ESPN, and your reaction is, what is ESPN? Talk about how that happened and how you actually ended up with maybe the world's shortest job interview.
Well, I had never heard of ESPN when a friend of my dad's mentioned it to me. We didn't have cable. We lived close enough to New York where you didn't need cable to get 6 or 7 stations in the old days. And he suggested that, and I had, up until that point, been unsuccessful finding a job in sports. I had, as you pointed out, tried to go the Major League Baseball route, been unsuccessful. So I managed to get an interview at ESPN through this friend of a friend. And I had this 2-minute interview. I'm not sure the human resources director actually looked up at me during the actual interview, and I was out the door in just a few minutes. But he had said, with your economics degree, you'd be qualified to be a driver in the mailroom. You'd be delivering the mail, taking executives back and forth to the airport, and if it snows, you'll be the one shoveling it. And it pays $8,000 a year. And so I was driving the 60 miles back to my home, not really sure what I was going to do. They said they might call me in a week. And so I said all this to my dad, and he suggested we go out and get a beer and talk about it. And he gave me what I believe is the best advice I have ever received. He said, if sports television is something that you can be interested in, that you can be passionate in, then you should take the job, get your foot in the door, and see where it goes. Basically, make a career decision, not a money decision. And I took that advice, and about a week later, I was offered the job, and a couple of days later after that, I was delivering the mail at ESPN. Yeah, that's how it got started.
To put that money in perspective, like $8,000, I think you ended up starting for $8,300. When you were a senior at Denison, you had recruiters coming in that were offering 4 or 5 times that amount of money. So this really was a financial sacrifice at the time. And your dad's decision was, don't worry about the money. This will be a sports career decision for you.
Well, exactly. And I think it really is a good advice for students today and young people, or even if you're already in the workplace. I mean, you've got to find something that you're passionate about and you're interested in. It's the way to be happy in your work life and to want to put in the hours, frankly, and the work it takes to succeed in our great country here. And so it's so important. And I give that advice. It's my dad's advice, but I give it out all the time, and I think it's valuable.
You're listening to This Week in America. Our guest on the program, George Bodenheimer, author of the new book, Every Town is a Sports Town, Business Leadership at ESPN, From the Mailroom to the Boardroom. Proceeds from the book going to the V Foundation for Cancer Research. And you mentioned a driver was in the job description, snow shoveler, mailroom, and a driver. One of the first people you had a chance to chauffeur, and you did it on an ongoing basis, was Dick Vitale. And everybody's thinking, wow, that had to be great. This guy's a megastar. What at the time, he recently was fired in the NBA. So you got him at a point when he was really sort of sticking his neck out as well, wasn't he, in working with ESPN?
Well, he was. I mean, he was had been fired by the Pistons, as you pointed out, and he was getting started at ESPN. Did the very first college basketball game that ever aired on ESPN, by the way. But he was getting underway, and I can't tell you how great it was for me to meet Dick Vitale. And as I point out in the book, we've been friends for almost over 3 decades now. What he has done to help build the ESPN company, what he has done to raise money for cancer research, what he has done to help people who are less fortunate. I can't say enough about Dick Vitale, and he's a wonderful person, and I feel fortunate to have gotten to know him.
In those early days as ESPN employee number 150, as you were working on production as well as programming, you decided you'd really like to get into sales and marketing, and an opportunity came up working with affiliates in Texas, and this really started your career, your ascent to the boardroom. Talk about that job, because at that point, and we'll get to it here in a second, but you're out trying to really change the business model for cable at the time.
Yes, and that was really the derivation of the title, Every Town is a Sports Town, of the book. I mean, I got out of the mailroom. I was in the videotape library for, 9-10 months, and then this job came open in Dallas to be a sales rep in 5 states in the Southwest, based in Dallas, and I applied for the job and got it. I later learned, by the way, Rick, that I was the only person in the company that applied for it, so it greatly enhanced my chances of getting it. But nevertheless, I found myself down there driving around those 5 states. I'd never been in those 5 states. It was such a wonderful opportunity to see a great part of this country and met so many nice people. But the point is that I was out there trying to sell ESPN, and I try to call on 3 mom and pop cable operators a day with the following sales pitch. Hi, we've got this 24-hour sports network. You have a 12-channel cable system. We would like you to put our 24-hour sports network on your cable system. What do you say? And I got some version of the following answer in every single town I was in. It was, gee, George, the notion of a 24-hour sports network sounds crazy, but we'll put it on if you're giving it away, which we were at the time, because and you can insert any town here, this is a sports town. And I quickly learned that every town in America considers themselves a sports town, and it's really such a strong part of the fabric of the United States, holding towns together, helping towns and the country, frankly, heal, after traumatic events. And ESPN basically tapped into that and has ridden that wave for 35 years. And that's how I got the title of the book, Every Town is a Sports Town. It's an important part of the landscape in our wonderful country.
George Bodenheimer, our guest on the program, was president of ESPN from 1998 through 2011. The book, as he mentioned, Every Town is a Sports Town, proceeds to the V Foundation for Cancer Research. During this period, the business model had changed, and instead of being ad-supported, you were actually going into the mom-and-pop cable operators and trying to collect at least a few cents at that point in time to carry the cable channel. Talk about that shift in the business model at that time.
Well, it was extremely important, and our president at the time, Bill Grimes, and the head of sales and marketing, Roger Werner, really deserved the credit for putting that model together and then selling it into the cable operators. I mean, I was way down the totem pole in the sales group then, but that was what we were doing. We were going to cable operators, and this is kind of 83, saying, guys, if you like what you see here, we have to be paid a fee for this. We can no longer give it away because we just simply can't operate the business. This cost structure to televise sports 24 hours a day is just too much. We can't make it on advertising alone. We need a fee if we're going to make it. And I talk quite a bit in the book about how difficult that was. But at the end of the day, the cable operators saw the value in ESPN, and after several years' effort in selling in our new business model, we were successful in basically converting the industry to the new model. And you could really argue that changed the face of television in the United States. Certainly, the cable television business was changed forever, and really has flourished on that model, and has driven the sports business, and really been quite revolutionary.
When you took over as president, you said you really wanted to continue the nonstop innovation that really needed to remain the order of the day. ESPN had gone through remarkable growth year after year. How difficult was it juggling that and still growing the company, but being the leader, being at the forefront?
Well, I don't want to say it was easy, because it wasn't, but I don't want to overstate, my role either. I only ever viewed myself as a member of the team. I think that goes back to my mailroom start and growing up at the company. I mean, I knew the company, and I knew the people of the company. I knew that I was surrounded by tremendously talented people. So I looked at my role as building the culture, and putting emphasis on the results of our overall team as opposed to individual accomplishment. And I promoted those who embodied that culture. I call them culture carriers. And when you have that kind of culture where people are focused on the team, think of a sports analogy if you care to, that's when you get maximum performance. And a company that starts to innovate and just expects to innovate all the time and continues to innovate, that's the holy grail for businesses, which is why I think this is a great book for business leaders, regardless of where you are in the hierarchy. I think the ESPN model is a model that can pave the way for continual innovation.
The book is called Every Town is a Sports Town, Business Leadership at ESPN, From the Mailroom to the Boardroom. George Bodenheimer, our guest on the program. Again, the proceeds going to the V Foundation for Cancer Research. Information on the book available at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And relying on people, there's a great story in the book. It's late 2001, and you've got this brand new production center. I mean, tens of millions of dollars. And the head of technology and engineering, Chuck Pagano, a very valued employee, says to you, George, we've got a problem. And here's where your leadership skills kicked in. Talk about going through that period, because you're making this transition to HD TV, which was far from settled at the time.
Well, it was far from settled, and I'm glad you brought up Chuck. He's just one of the hundreds of people that built the ESPN company. Just recently stepped down after nearly 35 years at the company. He was literally there from the very first night before we went on the air, and we were building this very expensive new broadcast center, and he came in and said to me, basically, we've got a problem. By the time this gets built, high definition television is going to be, starting to take off, and we're building a standard definition facility. And we pulled our group together, and there was a lot of worry, and we just gone through the major budgeting, and by then we were owned by Disney, so we were working with, our friends in California on how to pay for this and all that kind of business. But Chuck basically said, and this goes to the mission of the company, gee, if we believe our mission of serving fans, look at this high-definition picture. I'm showing it to you. You can see it's a far superior picture. Don't worry about the fact that there's no technical agreement in the industry on what technical specs. I will figure that out. I will make the right decision. And, you guys who run the business on the management side, you have to figure out the business model for how to make it pay. That's your job. But if we believe what we believe about serving sports fans, we have no choice but to move in high def. And that's what we did. So, midstream construction, we chucked our plans, no pun intended, and we converted everything to high def. And as a result, ESPN had a several-year head start on our competitors in delivering high-definition television, because you've got to change out all of your equipment, cameras. It takes retraining of your staff. You have to sell in a different signal to the distributors. It's a major change. But, of course, now you fast forward a few years later, whoever wants to watch another telecast again that isn't in high def, it, of course, became the standard. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of how fast we moved, and I'm proud of how Chuck Pagano basically said to our management team, guys, we have no choice. We have to do this.
Also in 2001 was a turning point for ESPN and for you. Ratings continued to go down. I think the first quarter of 2001, they were down like 19%. You got a proposed budget for the next year, which really reflects a continued drop in audience. And you call everybody together and you basically are saying, we're not going to project a loss of business. We're going to reverse this. We're not sure how, but what are we going to do about it? Talk about what happened at that meeting and all the positives that came out of there, because it was a very quick turnaround, and you again relied on people, which is a great management lesson, to try to get through what was a major crisis.
Well, it was. We really were. We were having a major decline in ratings, and we weren't doing a great job of communicating it amongst the staff. meaning nobody was really thinking about it fully or across the company, and then, of course, how to turn it around. So we pulled everybody together, and I basically said that, guys, we got a big problem here. What are we going to do about it? And literally someone in the back of the room said, raised their hand and said, well, why don't we make raising our ratings our number one company priority? That was 2001. And that started a process of priority setting that ESPN has been on since 2001, setting annual priorities, inviting the entire company base of 7,000 employees to suggest priorities for the year, relying on a management team to whittle that list down and coming up with 3 or 4 priorities a year that you then communicate to all 7,000 employees. And it's tremendously empowering. It goes to my point of view about respecting all employees and knowing that contributions can come from all employees, regardless of where you are in the company. And just the simple fact of telling them what the priorities are and encouraging them in whatever line of work they're in, whether they're in communications or finance or accounting or marketing, think about what you're doing in terms of these priorities. I guarantee you that simple process has helped drive the success of the ESPN company over the last almost 15 years now. And our ratings recovered immediately, and we went on a multi-year run of ratings growth there simply by stating it as a company priority and getting everybody on board with turning it around.
There was almost a built-in excuse at that time. A lot of people were saying it's only natural, it's fragmentation. We now have all these cable systems, all these cable channels that are entering into the marketplace. It's inevitable that you're going to fragment the marketplace by going in that direction. And yes, that was part of it, but you unleashed the research department and really owned up to the fact that, some of the problems we're creating ourselves by putting on programming that people aren't that interested anymore. SportsCenter is doing great, but we have to be cautious what we're programming around it because people aren't that interested in the current product.
Yes, like a lot of things, there's no kind of one answer.
Right.
And yes, the proliferation of new media and the internet and computers and smartphones certainly have contributed to splintering some of the pie. But the point is the overall pie has grown, which was not known at the time that was going to occur. But to your point, we took a hard look at what we were doing instead of just, it's easy to cast blame and look out there for business executives to say, not our fault, boss. Well, we took a hard look at what we're doing, and I would encourage all business leaders when you're having trouble to be honest and take a look at your own operations. And we discovered we had numerous issues. We had underperforming programming. We had a promotional strategy that had no longer, worked any longer. And we weren't focused on improving those things. And you take a hard look at that, make changes, hold everybody accountable, and you can turn your problems into you make them go away.
Time has gone by way too quickly. This is an excellent book. Every Town is a Sports Town. Business Leadership at ESPN, from the Mailroom to the Boardroom. Our guest on the program, the author of the book and president of ESPN from 1998 to 2011, still fondly known as ESPN employee number 150, George Bodenheimer. Proceeds from the book going to the V Foundation for Cancer Research. It's been a pleasure having you on the program. Continued success in your sort of retirement career, but I'm sure watching ESPN and keeping track of what's going on there. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Rick, thank you for having me.
You're listening to This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us.